Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the participants, both in the room and online. We had more than 200 people registered online, so I think we'll have a lively discussion this afternoon. And of course, a special thank you to our host, MEP Katainen, and also our co-hosts from the ICES, the Integrated Carbon Observation System, and also from the Baltic Sea Group, Sea Action Group, and of course also the Secretariat for the Intergroup of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development in the European Parliament. My name is Lena Topp, and I have the pleasure of moderating the discussions this afternoon, where we're really zooming in on nature-based solutions to increase carbon sinks on land. We will start with some opening remarks from our hosts and co-hosts, and then we will have two scientific presentations, and then we will also hear from policymakers from the European Commission, as well as a broad variety of stakeholders. We have deliberately asked all speakers to be short and to the point, because with so many participants registered, we recognize there's a huge interest in the topic, and we really want to hear from participants as well. So it's not a panel debate, it's an open discussion between experts and between all you who have registered to participate. For now, let me just briefly introduce the three speakers for the opening remarks. To my right, we have MEP Elsi Katainen, who is from Finland. She's also part of the Renew Europe group and is the vice chair of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development in the Parliament. And then all the way to the right, we have Dr. Werner Kusch, who is the director of ICES, the Integrated Carbon Observation System. And then we have Kai Granholm, who is the project manager and an environmental expert on sustainable agriculture at the Baltic Sea Action Group. So without further ado, I'll hand over to MEP Katainen for your opening remarks. So the floor is yours, please. problem with your microphone.
Really?
I hear we have a problem with your microphone, so I'm thinking the two of us might switch. So I'll get you over here, and then I'll sit to the right, because this microphone works, but this doesn't.
But if he's continuing,
this one is obviously working. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. As the director of ICOS, the Integrated Carbon Observation System, I want to warmly welcome you to this event. And I want to use my introduction to, in a way, find some problem or solve some problem with you. And the problem is the phantom of the atmosphere. That's CO2. CO2 is a gas you can't see. CO2 is a gas you can't smell or taste. And it's a trace gas. This means that it is only a small amount of CO2 is in the atmosphere. So if you imagine a square meter of air, then the CO2 in this air is about the content, the water content of this bottle. So it's not very much. But CO2 is a very powerful gas. It's a climate, or it's a greenhouse gas, so it is keeping the warmth in the atmosphere. So whether this bottle is half full or full is a big difference for our planet and for the temperature on our planet. So how can we solve the problem? I need your fantasy now. Let's imagine together CO2 is pink. Pink, tiny pink clouds that are in the sky, that are coming out of some chimneys or exhausts, or even coming out of my mouth now while I'm speaking. And these clouds are also, these tiny pink clouds, these CO2 clouds are also taken up by forests, by grasslands, by ecosystems, by the oceans. So this is the situation that you can perhaps imagine, but now it's getting even more complex. The wind is turning around all these little pink CO2 clouds, and we need to understand this system. And that's what we are doing. The integrated carbon observation system is putting sensors everywhere. We are putting sensors to see these clouds passing by, to see the clouds going down to the forests, coming up from the atmosphere. And that's what we can do in a standardized and a very accurate way. And that's why we are here. We want to talk at this interface between the science and the politics about our technology and how we can make use of our technology and our measurements and our knowledge, our scientific knowledge, for the mentioned nature-based solutions and for improving the carbon credit system. The interesting thing about our sensor equipment is that we can scale it. We can measure the CO2 balance or the carbon balance of Europe or even globally, but we can also scale down. We can zoom to a city, we can zoom to a forest and have a closer look there. And I think that's the important thing that we can bring into this debate, into this development. We will hear today a lot about the pitfalls and the problems of certification and so on, of nature-based solution, on permanence of things and so on. But I think it's important that everybody learns on both sides how we can develop a monitoring system, how we can really follow the different measures to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and how from these measurements that are standardized, that are really concrete and looking at a certain point, we can develop also verification of the things. So yeah, we are here to listen as scientists, but we are also here to show our equipment, to show our possibilities to help in particular in the monitoring and verification of nature-based solutions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Werner. And over to Kai now for the from the Baltic Sea Action Group, who is also one of our co-hosts. So please, for your opening remarks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Taine. I had to bring you back from this imaginary pink world that Bernard invited you to join, but maybe we can go back there later on. Honorable Mrs. Katainen, other members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it's a true privilege for me to join this opening of this event on nature-based climate action. And nature-based climate action, of course, brings us in contact with nature-based economies, agriculture, forestry, now mainly responsible of a major share of land use in Europe. And I represent the Baltic Sea Action Group, as Lene said, and our angle to this issue and our interest in agriculture, of course, derives from the understanding that land use and our food systems also have significant impacts on our waters. And Baltic Sea is one of the regional seas in Europe where these effects and consequences of our societies and of our economies are visible and tangible. And through working with farmers, landowners, agriculture in the past 15 years, we've discovered that the answer to a large extent actually lies in the soil where we seek to sequester more carbon from the atmosphere. You can put the next slide. And sometimes when we address decision makers, our target groups with our messages, we have brought in bottles or glass jars with different soil. I didn't do that today, but I show you two pictures. And these are taken from the same field, only 2 years apart. And the picture on the right shows the effects of carbon farming practices that build soil organic matter, build soil health, and build resilience on the farm and in our agricultural systems. It's through working with farmers and landowners, we've also discovered their need for science, for scientific evidence on what actually happens in that soil. What does that soil contain? How do we measure it, and how can we differentiate also in reward systems and policies the measures and practices that build soil that sequester carbon. And for this aim, we're very happy to have started the collaboration with the Finnish Meteorological Institute, and now also with ICOS, connecting atmospheric and meteorological research to agriculture, agronomic research, to build a holistic system where we can measure and prove and verify the soil carbon and other associated parameters like biodiversity, which we may touch upon later on, and create markets and incentive systems that incentivize and reward farmers and land managers, foresters for those practices that truly have an impact. So very much looking forward to the discussion and to also to learning more about this subject myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai, and thank you very much to all our hosts and co-hosts for these opening remarks. And I very much echo what you say. I'm sure we'll learn a lot today with everybody in the room and these excellent speakers that we have. Before we go on to hear from the policymakers from the European Commission and a variety of stakeholders, we'll first have two presentations from the scientific community. And the first one is by Claire Chenu, who is a research director at INRAE, l'Institut National pour la Recherche, de Recherche pour l'Agriculture, l'Alimentation et l'Environnement en France, and also professor of soil science at AgroParisTech. Her research deals with soil organic matter, which provides essential ecosystem services and is essential to adaptation and mitigation of climate change via carbon sequestration. Professor Chenu is very involved at the interface between science and policy and also in awareness raising activities on soils. So I'll invite Professor Chenu to come up here and sit at the very right. And then also I'm going to be a little bit the headmaster, because part of my my duties as moderator is also to be a timekeeper. And since we really do want to have time for questions, I'm going to be cheeky and put on an alarm. So when you hear the alarm, Claire, then it means that you have 1 minute left for your presentation. So I know you have a few slides also to share, so we will get them up on the screen. And maybe you can just, turn on the microphone and we can just quickly see if it works online.
Apparently it works, so it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here this afternoon. So thank you for offering me this possibility to talk to you about how to make nature-based solutions for carbon removal on land a success for climate, environment, and farmers. Next. So nature-based solutions, in fact, here it is, and what we're talking about is sequestration, that is the net uptake of atmospheric CO2 by the vegetation and by soil. So preserving and increasing tree biomass, preserving and increasing soil organic carbon stocks, and both are important, preserving and increasing. Next. Can it be a success for climate? Next. Well, a wide range of management options have been identified, and carbon stocks depend on the balance between the inputs and the outputs. So increasing the outputs can be cover crops, can be grassing, vineyards and orchards, agroforestry, temporary lays. You can also add carbon via exogenous organic matters such as compost, and reduce the inputs through conservation agriculture, agroforestry, and erosion management options. Next. How much does it allow to store? In France, for example, mainland France, we have quantified the effect of a range of management options. Next, you can do several next at the same time. And found that, again, diversity of options that are effective. It allows to store the equivalent of 41% of agricultural emissions, French agricultural emissions, 7% of total French emissions. Similar, so significant, but not the magic bullet. The same exercise, a similar exercise has been done at the scale of the European Union, and we are doing one in the framework of the program I am chairing. And you see again 5 to 12% of total emissions. There has been also estimates at the global scale. So we can say significant, even large estimates. Next. But when you quantify, and we did it in France, how much you can store at a given cost, you put an upper ceiling, then you see that it's much less and that you need incentives. Next and next. There are intrinsic limits and challenges. Here I represented the evolution of soil organic carbon stocks, the brown line, as a function of time in the x-axis. You see the brown line is slightly decreasing. That's unfortunately the situation of cropland soils in Europe. Now, if you, for example, destroy hedges or convert permanent grassland to cropland, you will have a very sharp decrease, very sharp and important decrease. So the priority next is to protect existing carbon stocks. Implementing carbon storing options allow to increase carbon stocks, but at some stage, you will reach a new equilibrium. You cannot increase forever, and that's very important. And you can also see the time axis, decades. It takes time. Next. So it's important, and next and next. It's important to quantify additional soil organic carbon. And if the practices are left by the farmer, for example, or the forester, you go back to the initial equilibrium. Hence, it's important to ensure permanence of the management option and to avoid leakage, that when you store carbon somewhere, you in fact store less carbon elsewhere in the landscape. So intrinsic limits. Next. And also, you have to account for other greenhouse gases. It's very important that can even in some cases compensate for the additional carbon stored. So it's very important to establish a full greenhouse gas balance at the plot scale and also at the scale of the whole suite of technical operations. Next. Environment now. Next. The context now is that European soils, well, it's true worldwide, but it's true in Europe, European soils are being degraded. They are threatened, they are degraded. The most recent estimate is that about 60% of European soils are not healthy, not able to provide ecosystem services. And that's one of the reasons why a soil monitoring law has been proposed in July by the Commission. So compared to that, in relation to that, soil organic matter, when you increase soil carbon in soil, you increase soil organic matter, in fact. And soil organic matter is key to soil health, to water regulation, and to soil biodiversity. It increases the capacity of soil to retain water, better soil structure. So it's really, there are really co-benefits, well, benefits to find here. However, it's important to address trade-offs in terms of what do you do with the natural resources, water, biodiversity, what do you do with nutrients? So it's important to protect, address trade-offs and protect natural resources. Now, farmers, can it be a success for farmers? Well, if you look at the relationships, generally yields increase with soil organic matter and hence soil organic carbon content of soil, although the relationships are usually very messy, but there's a general increase. What I wanted to show you is the other graph that shows how inter-year yield variation as a function in the x-axis of soil organic carbon stocks. You see that it decreases. It means that the richer the soils in organic carbon, in organic matter, the more stable are the yields. This is an index of adaptation to climate change. And it's really important now to quantify the effects of adaptation, of the role of organic matter in adapting soils and agroecosystems to climate change. Next. For farmers, the context also is that there is a need to change agricultural systems. We're in the context of the Green Deal, of the Farm to Fork strategy, and this also raises the question, well, the challenge is probably one of the challenges how to reward the pioneers, those who have already stored much carbon, and then they cannot be financed for storing more because maybe they're already at the equilibrium, and this is absolutely essential. We need to reward the pioneers. Next. And we need for that a reliable, transparent, hybrid monitoring, reporting, and verification system. Why do this will be presented by Jari, but why do I say hybrid? Because to associate farm data, so activity data, remote sensing, different data sources, soil crop models to predict the evolution of soil organic carbon stocks in soils over time, and direct sampling or associated with remote sensing to verify how much has been stored. And next, it will be my conclusion. So nature-based solutions for carbon removal on land have the potential, I think, to be a success for climate, for the environment, and for farmers. Soil health is, for me, as I'm a soil scientist, but I think is the benefit you can expect from increasing soil carbon stocks, from increasing soil organic matter. And contribution to climate change mitigation is a co-benefit. The main reason for me to do it is to increase soil fertility and soil health. Next. However, an integrative view is really needed. It's very important not only to focus on carbon, but to account for other greenhouse gases, to account for different ecosystem services. And there are synergies to valorize, there are trade-offs, and behind there are systems, whole systems to change. Next. Measuring, reporting, and verification systems are essential, and in the context of this soil monitoring law proposal, there's a need to anchor both monitoring systems, that of carbon and that of ecosystem services. And last, and farmers are the stewards, so there's a need for co-construction and to build fair and functional tools for carbon removals using nature-based solutions. And on that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claire, for sharing these insights and nice graphic slides as well for us to better understand all the details. So, dear participants, please hold your questions until after the second scientific presentation that we have by Jari Liski, who is connecting with us online. Jari is a research professor, chief scientist at the Finnish Meteorological Institute. His research work focuses on the interaction between atmosphere and forests. And as an expert on the soil carbon cycle, Jari was invited to take part in the discussions in Finland about the role of forest and soil in combating climate change. Today, Jari will talk about the importance of integrating field and satellite measurements with modeling to obtain a reliable certification framework for carbon removals. Jari, like before, I'll put on my headmaster hat, so I'll put the alarm on, and when it goes off, you have 1 minute left. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So, dear Mrs. Katainen, other members of the European Parliament and all other participants of this event in Brussels and online. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present. It's really an honor, and I'm excited about the whole event. So, yeah, the Claire's presentation, I think that was a really excellent kind of a background or introduction, that was the first part of the story, and gave really good background for my presentation. And what I'm now going to do is that present the scientific community's view on what kind of methods we need in order to quantify the effects of improved farming on the soil health, and on the soil carbon especially, and the greenhouse gases. So the next slide, please. So the outline of my talk is simply that first I would like to explain what do we need to estimate, and which do we have to estimate, and then what is the way forward. Simply that. So the next slide, please. Yeah, here's one of our collaborative farmers in Finland, and he's a farmer who experiments with carbon farming or regenerative farming. He grows an Italian ryegrass under the main crop on 1/2 of his experimental plot to store carbon in soil. And our task here is to estimate the effect of this farming practice on the carbon balance of this soil compared to the business as usual reference. The next slide, please. Then when we go to the landscape scale, our task is to estimate the carbon balance of each field in a landscape. Next slide, please. And as a matter of fact, Leo already explained how different soils can be in starting conditions, like if the business as usual farming is continued, and how important it is to estimate in different cases the additional effect of the improved practices on the development of the soil organic matter and soil carbon. So that was my point with this slide, but we can move on to the next one because Claire kindly already explained that. So so the attributes that we need to estimate, monitor, report, and verify, they are not only that how much carbon is sequestered or how greenhouse gases are avoided, but it is also that how much of these favorable effects are additional, and for how long does the effect last. And then in addition to that, it's important to establish this link between different type of stakeholders, farmers, companies, and the public sectors to develop a monitoring and estimation system that is compatible with the needs of these different stakeholders. I use here the word business model, but that is what I mean. Slide, please. Yeah, and then I'm moving on to the second part. So what kind of measurements we have to estimate the changes in soil carbon? So we can take direct measurements of soil carbon. You see that the photo with the tractor on it, taking soil samples. We can also measure directly the carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas exchange between the fields using the chambers, which you can see on the top left side of this slide, or then we can use this equipment that measures this exchange of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases continuously between the field and the atmosphere on the right-hand side of the slide. And then we can get useful information using satellites and other remote sensing techniques. And in addition to these measurement methods, we have process-based modeling of agricultural ecosystems that is very useful in this context. So the next slide, please. So even though each of these methods, the measurement methods and these modeling methods, they really do give valuable information about the carbon and greenhouse gases, but each of them still have its limitations. If we do direct measurements of soil carbon, so the soil carbon changes are difficult to detect using only repeated soil carbon measurements because these changes over time are difficult to distinguish from the high spatial variability. And then it's also because now we need to be able to estimate how much of the effect is additional. A result of the improved practice is that it's quite impractical to maintain kind of a business as usual reference fields on those farms who are interested in starting to use these regenerative carbon farming practices. Then if we think about the satellite measurements and other remote sensing, is that they are actually unable to measure soil carbon or greenhouse gases at field scale directly. And then if we think about emission factors, that we can establish that this much of carbon dioxide per hectare per year is that this, while they are quite useful in averaging and for kind of overall regional estimates and even like national estimates, they still cannot capture the spatial and temporal heterogeneity. So that is why they're not alone suitable for this kind of farm or field scale monitoring. And then if you think about the process-based modeling, they still lack some necessary processes, and there are uncertainties in the model parameter values and the structure of these models. So next slide, please. So the scientific community suggests that the way forward is to integrate the different quantification methods, the different measurement methods and the different modeling approaches into a digital system. And then in addition to the integration, to invest in developing each of these quantification methods for this common goal. Next slide, please. So this is what we have done at FMI. We have followed both of these paths, and we have integrated different methods into a digital system. And our idea of the system is that with the information from the ordinary fields and satellites, we can provide with our model data fusion system, we can calculate carbon and greenhouse gas values for each of these fields, for example, that you see on this slide. But without information from these reference sites that Werner Kutsch is representing the ICAS system, for example, without the information that these stations and our other study sites produce, we cannot evaluate how reliable our estimates are. And especially these are very important for us to know that which parts of our modeling approach we would need to improve and which additional measurements we would need to take. And then we have developed a kind of a field observatory web application where anybody can see online and what is going on our study sites, and then we are working hard to make this useful for the different applications in the public and the private sectors, and also for the farmers. Next slide, please. And this is an example of this data fusion, and this is about how we have calibrated one of our ecosystem models that we're using data from a reference site in Finland. So on the upper panel, you see the Sentinel-2 satellite measurements on the leaf area of this field. And then you can see that without these measurements, our model would predict this green area to be the leaf area of that field. But when we have the Sentinel-2 satellite information, which are these black dots there, you can see how we can improve the performance of our model, and that is shown with the brown area there. And you can see the difference after we have calibrated that model to predict the leaf area. It does a decent job during the validation period, which is not used for this calibration. And leaf area is very important to estimate correctly in order to estimate the photosynthesis correctly. And you can see the similar approach for this carbon dioxide flux between the field and the atmosphere. So that is the variable that we really need to know. So this was how I wanted to illustrate this model data fusion, an example of that. Next slide, please. Yeah, and in this field observatory, if you can still go to the previous one, please. Yeah, thank you. So in this field observatory, we can monitor online what is going on our study sites. And here you can see that how this is of a few tens of days, and the yesterday is on that mark where it's a calendar mark. You can see that how this method, continuous measurement method, it shows that during the daytime it's on a negative value, which means that it's the field accumulates carbon from the atmosphere, whereas these positive values indicate carbon loss during the nights. And now for this site, we have also introduced a carbon balance forecast for the next 15 days that takes the 15-day weather forecast from this ECMWF, the weather forecast, and then we assimilate our carbon dioxide and leaf area estimates also to this forecast, and that forecast updates daily in the evening. Next slide, please. Then we are working on to decrease the cost of the soil carbon measurements by using laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, and we estimate that if successful, this can decrease the cost of the soil carbon measurement by as much as 8%. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then we are also developing these methods of applied mathematics in order to make the best of most efficiently use these methods and linking them to the modeling. And here's an example how even a small number of these measurements help to improve the reliability of our model simulations. And that was my last slide. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Jari, for this interesting presentation. We now have a little bit of time set aside for questions from the audience. I think we have time for one burning question. Just as a reminder, we do have a second Q&A session after the presentations from the policymakers and the stakeholders. But please come forward now if you have any burning questions or a comment to what you've heard from our two scientific experts. For participants online, you can write your question or comment in the chat. And for people in the room, raise your hand. And then, yeah, as I said, we have time for one or two burning questions now, or we will move on and take them afterwards. So I'm looking around and also looking online.
Question, if I may. Hello, Jari. This is Ivan Janssens. Well, I'm still wondering with the remote sensing. It's important, I think, for the productivity of the system. But an equally important component is the loss of the carbon, the heterotrophic respiration. And I still struggle to see how we can improve the models with remote sensing from that aspect, which is basically half of what we need. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Ivan. It's nice to see you. So I would say that, like you said, that that we wouldn't. I think that we need to use the information that we have to kind of whatever. If the information is useful, then we can use it. And it's exactly like you said, that when we are assimilating the leaf area index to our system, it helps us to improve the reliability of estimates, how much carbon goes into the system. And not equally important is that how much comes out. And that is something that you cannot get much help from the Sentinel-2 satellite. To some extent, we can get help from that from the Sentinel-1 satellite, which gives us information about the soil moisture. So that helps to that, but I agree with you like 100% that satellites do not give us as much information on the output of the carbon as it does on the input of the carbon, but still I do not think that it makes it sort of useless. It's just that we need to understand that what is it good for and what is it not good for.
Thank you very much, Jari. MEP Katainen, you had a comment. I'll share. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll share this one with you because this was
just a short question to Claire. You said that 60% of European soil is not in good shape, which is very concerning knowledge, and it's a bad situation. As a matter of fact, can you see any area differences in the European map?
There are area, well, the main, for example, is it connected? Yes, there are area differences, and there are contrasted situations between countries, between the north and the south. Well, for example, erosion, wind erosion, essentially Mediterranean countries are sensitive. Water erosion, which is the main degradation, it is, I would say, Western Europe, Mediterranean as well. Soil compaction, it's maybe more important in eastern countries, so there are differences. But soil sealing, well, soil sealing due to urbanization, it's located around big cities, for example. And loss of organic matter is essentially affecting cropland. And I think it happens nearly everywhere in Europe. So there are differences, of course, in different countries due to soil type, due to climate differences, and due to contaminated sites. You have more where you have a long history of industry. So yes, not all countries have the same situation, but it is a concern in general. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I think I saw one more hand in here at the back, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicola Holzen. I am a deputy head of unit of the unit in DG Agri dealing with the Integrated Administrative and Control System, the IACS. And I was wondering, it's a question to Jari. You already mentioned you are using Sentinel-2, so optical. I was wondering, Sentinel-1 is radar. I mean, I would have expected that this might be more interesting for you, but staying with the optical, are you also using VHR imagery, which we are actually providing for the measuring in the framework of the LPIS to member states? And are you defining the parcels via the land parcel identification system? And my last question is the use of geotech pictures, which we want to enforce as of 2025. Would that be beneficial for your monitoring project? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Is that the reason we're using Sentinel-2 to estimate the leaf area index is that because that's the satellite that measures that, but it's sometimes because of cloudy days. That is that means that we do not get the measurements as frequently as we would like to have, and that's the reason for using that. And then there is a really international level expertise at the Finnish Meteorological Institute about these different satellite programs of European Space Agency, and also a lot of collaboration with NASA and Japan as well. So we are sort of constantly exploring the possibilities of kind of how to use the various satellites products with our system. So we are sort of certainly all the time looking for new possibilities, but so far what is kind of how would I say, like a practice-oriented development. This is the Sentinel-2 is so far what we have used, and then we have done scientific research on how to integrate the information from Sentinel-1 to our system. But I agree with that. There's certainly many like more modern and like the more recent missions that certainly provide useful information, but we haven't used them yet.
Thank you very much, Jari. I'm sorry, but we will have to move on to the next panel, and then we have a much longer Q&A session after the next panel. There's questions coming in online as well and comments, and we will make sure to share them with the speakers afterwards. So I don't think we'll have the opportunity to go through all the questions today, but they are being registered. So please, keep them coming, and we'll be happy to share them with the speakers. For our next panel, well, first of all, thank you to our two scientific experts, and also thank you for all the questions. We will now shuffle a little bit here at the panel so that we have room for everybody. So I'll ask Nicola to come up here at the panel. We have Christian Holzleiser connecting online. Kai is already here. And Alex, if you can also come up. And then we have, I think, everybody for the, and then where do we have Gary here as well? Yeah, excellent. Good.
Should I stay?
Yeah, no, you can stay. But next time you speak, we just need to change the mic because it's not working that well.
Well, they say that they can hear me.
Yeah, but apparently online it's problematic. We'll see. Oh, yeah. All right. So as I said, we now have we move on to an open moderated discussions with policymakers and a variety of stakeholders. Again, I put on my headmaster hat. Speakers, you have each 4 minutes to speak. I'll set on the alarm. Again, it's not to be too much of a headmaster, it's more to have enough questions. We already have a waiting list of questions coming in, so it's really allow for the audience also to be part of this. Just for the kind of the formalities, we will do the 5 presentations in one go, and then we will have the Q&A session at the end. So take note of your questions, and then you could either be a question to everybody, or it can be a question to one of the specific speakers. So our first speaker is connecting online. It's Christian Holzleiser, who is the head of unit for land, economy and carbon removals at DG Klima at the European Commission. Christian is part of the expert group on carbon removals and also a contributor to the proposal for the regulation on EU certification for carbon removals. So Christian, the floor is yours. And I will put my alarm, so yeah, go ahead. When you hear it, there's 1 minute left for you in your presentation. Please.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. Good afternoon to all. Very sorry that I can't be with you. I'm not far away. I'm at the council building, but we have today a working party on the carbon removal certification framework. So yeah, I only have very limited time, but nevertheless, very happy that it works out and that I can quickly participate in your interesting event. Carbon farming is, of course, an essential part of what we are doing in this carbon removal certification. It's about the storage of carbon in our soils, in our forests. And there are a lot of initiatives around in Europe. You've heard about some already today. And I think what is important is that we focus now on those that can deliver these triple benefits. They are good for climate, they are good for biodiversity, but they also increase the fertility of the soil and they offer good business opportunities. So if you look from the climate biodiversity aspect, the rewetting of peatlands is a very, very clear one that we should privilege. I think also agroforestry has a very large potential, both climate, biodiversity, but I think also on the fertility, on water irrigation, and so on. So how can we integrate better landscape elements in our agriculture? But of course, that can also mean quite a big changes to the way that we farm. And then, of course, everything related around soil carbon, regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of activity in Europe right now. The potential for carbon storage is maybe lower per hectare here, but there are all the benefits for fertility, for biodiversity. And of course, if we can manage to enroll a high number of farmers there, you also get the numbers for climate. And I think what is so essential is we need to empower the farmers. We need to empower the farmers to take up carbon farming because they have the best knowledge about their land. They must be motivated, they must be incentivized to get this going. So, and there are two essential enabling factors. The first one is monitoring, reporting, verification. We need an absolutely credible system here, and we need to go to the level of the farm, to the forest. We must enable every farmer to know their carbon balance. And so we need to tap into all the technologies that we have in Earth observation, be it satellites, but also drones, any other optical solutions. We need to use artificial intelligence, and we need to deliver or to handle a high number of data, and we need to do this. And then we also need to get better at soil sampling. We need to get the costs down, and then we need to provide that advice to the farmers. And this is essential. There need to be easy applications so that farmers can take up those methodologies, and it becomes a good business case. And what I understand, we should really be talking about carbon farming practices that could then yield a price of 100-200 euros per ton of carbon. So a more substantial change in the management. But this seems, based on the current experience, this is what is interesting for farmers and what can attract them to be doing this. So, and we hope, of course, that with our framework for the carbon removal certification, we can there go a long way, be both helpful for more result-based public financing as well as private financing, and the strong link synergies with the common agricultural policy and the monitoring systems there were also just pointed out, and I can only support that. So thanks a lot, and again, sorry that I can't be with you in person.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you for being flexible to making yourself available, although there were last-minute schedule changes from the Spanish presidency. So much appreciated that you made the effort to still tune in. And also thank you for sharing these insights on the necessities for the framework. So I hope you can stay on still for the Q&A. I'm sure there will be some questions. So yeah. I want to introduce our next speaker, which is Nicola Di Virgilio, who is the Policy Officer at Unit B2 Environmental Sustainability at DG Agri. You contributed to the Commission communication on sustainable carbon cycles and also followed for DG Agri the proposal for regulation on the EU certification for carbon removals. So you know the drill with the headmaster alarm. Please go ahead and share the views of DG Agri, please.
Thank you very much also from my side for the invitation. I'm here replacing my head of unit, Gael Marion, who couldn't come today. And actually, the idea was to complement what Christian already said. It's more on the role of the common agricultural policy in helping the implementation of natural-based solution. You know that the Commission approved the strategic plans of member states, and they started this year. And then they have indeed planned and recognized at several levels the need to increase organic carbon, they need to increase carbon stock, and according to the SWOT analysis they did. Okay, there are different needs identified by different member states, but this also reflects the different situation in different member states. And in particular, when we talk about soil, this is even more evident, and even within the same member states. So they planned different combinations of mandatory requirement for farmers, which are part of a conditionality, the use of voluntary incentives like the eco scheme, the agro-environmental climate commitments, and we see indeed quite a lot there. In terms of planned interventions for carbon increase and protection. But not only for the practices implementation, but also for other things which are very useful in this context, which are, for example, measures for cooperation, for innovation, for investments, for farm advisory, knowledge transfer, and also they need to cover some transactional costs, which are sometimes there, particularly when we are going to try to measure the effect of implementation of a practice. We have a specific result indicators in the Common Agricultural Policy, which is the R14, carbon storage in soil and biomass, and we can see from this indicator, from a first analysis of all CAP strategic plans, that around 35% of the European utilized agricultural area will receive support for carbon farming practices to remain quite general. But there are also other indicators, for example, on afforestation, on landscapes, on soil protection. These also are contributing to carbon farming. Also, to give you some numbers, this is around 57 million hectare, sorry, million hectare in EU that will receive support for carbon farming. There is support for afforestation as well. It's very different among member states. Usually member states prefer to support forest measures and forestation with other funds than the Common Agricultural Policy. Portugal, Greece, Italy, they are particularly ambitious on that. A lot of support for agroforestry, even for conversion from arable to grassland, but to a lesser extent. Ban on ploughing, maintenance of grasslands, cover crop is almost in all member states. You can see overall there are almost 170 interventions that goes in this direction. So the CAPs can be a tool in the next years to support the implementation of carbon farming, and as Christian was saying, in synergy with the proposal for the framework certification, I think it really can give the opportunity to find synergies between the CAP and other potential voluntary markets that will develop from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for these remarks. Our next speaker is Alex Mason, who is the head of the Climate and Energy at WWF Europe, and has been working on EU climate, energy, and environmental policies for over 20 years. Before joining the WWF, Alex spent most of his career working for the British government and the European Commission. Alex, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Yes, I have many happy memories of working in DG Agri and DG Energy, and had no desire to return to the UK after Brexit. So I'm very happy to be able to have stayed here. Thank you very much for inviting us to share our views on this very important subject. It's one that's very dear to our hearts in WWF because it cuts across the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity. And, you know, just to say at the very outset, it's clear that we do need carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere, and not just in the second half of the century to balance remaining residual emissions. You know, we need removals as fast as possible to help tackle the climate emergency. And it won't surprise you to hear that we are strongly supportive of nature-based solutions to carbon dioxide removal because of the many potential co-benefits, not least for biodiversity, but also, as we've heard, for soil fertility, preventing flooding, resilience of forests to pests and diseases, and promoting jobs in rural areas. But, you know, we would strongly argue that you can't treat removals in the land use sector as directly equivalent, ton for ton, as fossil fuel emissions, or indeed methane or nitrous oxide emissions, or permanent geological storage of CO2 lasting centuries. And you know, not to in any way downplay the importance of the scientific research that we've heard about, which is crucial, but we feel that the Commission proposal on CRCF is extremely worrying because, well, partly there is nothing on exactly which removals, which activities will be covered, and what the specific criteria for those will be. That's all left to later date to be decided through delegated acts. It's also completely opaque as to what these might be used for. And so we think there is a very serious risk that, you know, we could be creating another bioenergy fiasco where we end up encouraging things that actually undermine climate action and results in delaying the very rapid emissions reduction that we need. So in terms of you know, our advice for co-legislators, I mean, the first thing would be to completely exclude products from the scope of the CRCF. There is no good scientific evidence that we're aware of that harvesting trees is a good climate solution, even if a small fraction of the carbon lost from the forest ends up in a long-lived product. Secondly, carbon farming. I mean, if that's going to be included, it shouldn't result in credits that can be traded, bought by companies to avoid reducing emissions in their supply chains, and there need to be strict biodiversity and social criteria for those activities. And finally, just to finish on finance, I mean, clearly we believe that farmers, foresters, landowners should be rewarded for adopting environmentally and climate-friendly practices. And we would favor a contribution-based model for private finance. And then, of course, there is the Common Agricultural Policy. We spend a third of the EU budget on it. A very large fraction of it goes to large commercial farms that probably don't need it. And I think an honest conversation about reorienting the Common Agricultural Policy funding at least towards climate and biodiversity-friendly farming is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice, for sharing your initial remarks and the views of WWF. Our next speaker is Kyle Granholm. As a reminder, he's the project manager and an environmental expert on sustainable agriculture at the Baltic Sea Action Group, who is also one of the co-hosts of today's event. Over to you, please.
Okay, thank you for this very fortunate position to be able to speak again. Can I have some slides continuing from where we left off? Let's stop there in the previous picture where we have the field. Yes, I, by the way, very much share the concerns and issues to be alerted about, shared here before regarding the carbon removals and how to account and use these removals. But this is actually beyond our kind of main area of operations. We've defined our contribution to this matter to the farm and food chain level, trying to build sustainability from within there, and then the rules on how to use the removals are another discussion. But here the photo, you see a spring field in southwest Finland where winter rye has been sown in the previous autumn, and now you see that it has wintered quite well, thanks to the frost cover, and actually they were able to get pretty good harvest of this rye. And this is, I chose this photo because it exemplifies many things in this carbon farming. Well, first of all, it's a field, it's a real farm. It depicts a carbon farming measure, namely the winter crop or green cover over winter time. But it also shows the variations in our conditions across Europe and also across years. This happened to be a particularly good year, but it's not always like that. You might lose the crop altogether if the winter is too mild. So to learn all about that and to learn about the conditions on the farm and how the farmers operate in the food chain and how they can be steered and incentivized to be more sustainable in producing food, but also the ecosystem amenities that we desire from agriculture. We have since 2018 established a collaborative platform. We call it Carbon Action, and you can proceed with the slides, please. And here's a snapshot what it contains. We have 100 pilot farms spread across Finland. We have more or less intensive study sites where also the research shown by Jari earlier is taking place. But altogether we have more than 2,000 of farmers and other stakeholders participating in events, trainings, peer clubs about sustainable farming practices, carbon farming, regenerative agriculture. We also have a quite active company platform where we discuss the aspects of the food chain and food industry and how we can jointly advance the sustainability objectives, climate objectives of food companies, as well as then the societal objectives. And I may have some examples of those activities here. If we have the next slide, please, and the next, please. I will have the examples later on, but here is our kind of the view on why we think that it is important to connect, first of all, carbon removals with productive agriculture, and also with this robust monitoring, reporting, and verification system of soil carbon. So first of all, it should aim for the overall sustainability and recognition of the multiple benefits, as we heard, and carbon sequestration then we get as a whole benefit. Of course, also the climate policy and the market extension of that and measures need to be better steered, better targeted, better accounted, and for that we need the science that we heard earlier today. Also, we have high hopes that the CAP and our common agricultural policy will be reviewed, reformed. It will be more effective, more targeted, and more flexible also in the future. and a better knowledge on the effects of measures help in that. Also help in designing result-based payments. And all of this should be done in a holistic way, taking also biodiversity into account, and develop, while we are developing metrics for soil carbon, we should develop metrics for biodiversity and use these in an integrated way. Can I have the next slide, please? I'll just quickly.
Very quickly.
Yes,
So we can
yes. Go next, please. So I promised you one example from the food chain. So here's an example of the Finnish dairy company Valio, who have a target for climate neutral milk chain by 2035. And as one measure to reduce the emissions, they have incorporated regenerative agriculture or carbon farming on lay grass fields as a measure, aiming to up to 21% of the needed reductions. And Baltic Sea Action Group and Carbon Action Platform is cooperating with this company and supporting this target through training, through an online course on regenerative farming, which the company has included as an optional measure in their sustainability premium program for the farmers. So this is already happening, but what we need for this is the rules on how to account it, how to account the carbon and to, of course, avoid double counting of soil carbon.
Thank you, Kai. I'm just going to jump in here so we can have also the last speaker and the questions from the audience online and in the room. Gary is the chairperson of the advocacy group EU Staff for, who represents state, forest and companies and enterprises and agencies. Over to you, Gary.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. As has been mentioned, I'm representing here the use of the state forestry companies across Europe, but also the Irish state forestry company called Coillte. And my comments really are around the policy options here in relation to forestry. I mean, we all accept, I think, forestry is a potential in terms of addressing our climate action needs as a carbon sink and as a way to actually sequester carbon. But we think we need to be careful in terms of the policy options that are taken here. One of the things we'd say initially straight off is that we need to look at the fossil fuel emitters as well as the other side of that equation. That we need to reduce, and we need to ensure that emissions are reduced from fossil fuels. So substitution for timber products is very important, but also we need to make sure that measures around carbon certification are not used for greenwashing and for other type of practices where the emission continues on the fossil fuel side, but there's a kind of carbon sort of neutral like argument being made actually by those emitters in actually to plant different trees around and have those kind of programs. The second area that we think is an obvious one is we need to increase the level of afforestation across Europe. And for that, I think we need a lot of land, and it's a huge pressure in terms of a number of countries where land use is becoming a very political issue. Whereas for agriculture, whereas for urban development, we need to prioritise the amount of land across Europe that is available for afforestation, because we are going to reduce, and we would hope we would reduce actually deforestation for other purposes and move the dial towards afforestation. One thing I would say, which is really important, is that although we have a carbon sink across Europe, and so LULUCF regulation recognises that it is under threat. It is not, the academic studies would show that it is not as strong, it's not growing as we would like it to grow. And that's mainly because we have very old and mature forests, which to some extent is good, but forests do die. So the difficulty here is that although it's a carbon sink, over time it doesn't become a carbon sink. It becomes a carbon emitter as forests die and as they're impacted by other disturbances like around sort of climate change, around wind and other impacts on old growth forests. So we have to look at carbon, or we have to look at forestry in terms of how we manage it better, how we sustain that, the forests better. So therefore, disagreeing with Alex a little bit here, we do have to harvest our trees. We do have to look at harvest them, for wood products to actually maintain that carbon. But we need to regenerate our carbon sink and look at harvesting for those purposes. Wood products are a very effective way of maintaining the sort of carbon within our timber products. And we also need to mitigate against disturbances that are coming around climate change in the future. I think one other point I would say is the forest owners themselves and also farmers are the best people to manage what they're doing on their farms. As we've heard from a number of presentations, decisions around thinning, decisions around species mix are best made at the farm level, at the forestry level. Each country has a different set of challenges. So long-term solutions from Europe need to be carefully managed in the sense that, if we're planting forests, we need to think about the long-term, not the short-term. So we can look at things like extending rotations for trees to actually store carbon a bit longer, but we do need to look at forest management at a local level and with a local farmer. One area, just conscious of time, I would mention, another part of what forestry is looking at now in terms of our states are looking at legacy issues around planting on peatlands and other areas where we need to actually regenerate or redesign our land. And carbon certification and the approach from the Commission is very helpful there in encouraging forestry owners to go and look at the best use of their estate. It might not always be around forestry, it could be around actually forestry redesign or different species. So that's another area where we think across Europe there are opportunities around carbon certification, look at models where we can restore land and we can restore our sort of peatlands, particularly in the Irish case and in some other countries. And I think those opportunities should also be looked at in terms of carbon certification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you all the speakers. We're now moving on to the open Q&A session. So if you have any questions, raise your hand in the room and start by saying your name and who you're working for. And I'm also looking online if we have any questions there. I see one question here, please.
Thanks very much. So I'm Kelsey Perlman. I'm a policy officer on forest and climate issues at the NGO Fern. So I just wanted to say this is a really key discussion, getting clarity on the sort of science and policymaking interface. I think nobody disagrees that we need better monitoring and better science, but I think where this policy science interface has failed has been around the incentives. So, I mean, something I would mention before I go into my question is we've had assessments very recently by ProPublica, The Guardian, UC Berkeley. I mean, all of these groups have commented on offsetting particularly as a enormous failure for being able to improve carbon sequestration in forests. And it's normally because either scientific understandings are ignored and it drives towards less than optimal practices like planting instead of improving unsustainable harvesting levels, which is another main driver of the loss of the carbon sink in Europe, or it drives cheating. So for the academics, but I guess also everybody else on the panel, can removing the trading element by certifying activities and merely quantifying the carbon stored be a solution to what has been a very problematic market for forest restoration? And my last question is, do the panelists support a forest monitoring law, much like the soil monitoring law that was mentioned, to be able to help achieve these objectives of actually knowing what's going on in Europe's forests? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I'm looking around. Who wants to go in first? Gary?
Yeah. So in terms of just, I mean, if I understood the question first, the first question was really around the carbon monitoring. So absolutely, we should be getting better at that in the science. I think these sort of forums around soil health as well, understanding, our sort of carbon models, absolutely we need to look at that a lot more and get more science around that. I think we need to balance between the sort of carbon that's in soil and the carbon that's in forestry, and learn more about that, because I think that there's actually more effective use of carbon through forestry measures because they have a more immediate impact. On the forest monitoring law, just very quickly, I mean, I think our concern in USIFOR is that we is a risk of actually duplicating what has already been done by member states. So there's a lot of monitoring happens, a lot of inventory is happening at the moment. We're not against monitoring forestry, but we want to make sure that it is not overly complex. It leads to the right outcomes and it's based on the right science. But at the moment, our concern would be that at the moment we have a lot of monitoring going on. We certainly have in Ireland. And what is the additional value of having monitoring as a process at the European Commission level, and we just need to be convinced on that.
Thank you, Gary. Werner, and I don't know, Nicola, if you want to come in.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it was mainly on forest, so which is not my field of expertise. Sorry.
No, don't go on.
I can maybe only echo the fact that maybe to speak more from the agricultural side, that indeed monitoring it's very important. But I think it's what we expect from the research is the possibility to reduce the cost of monitoring. This is it's very important, but still maintaining the robustness of the quantification, because this, of course, it gives all the opportunity also to small farmers to be part of systems and to of course try to demonstrate the effect of the implementation of their practices. Only on that.
Thank you, Nicola. And Werner?
Well, I completely agree. We have, for me, a shockingly bad market of certificates because there is not a proper monitoring, and there is also not a proper integration of scientific knowledge into that. So I think we have heard today that science can provide a lot of knowledge about potential measures. So if a farmer wants to do something, there's a lot of information available what he can do, or she. But this is usually an ex-ante certificate that is sold. So it's a promise. It's a promise that in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time, there is some carbon dioxide removal. And there is no monitoring in between. So I think we should have two things that are really important. One is that we are shifting a bit, at least from ex-ante to ex-post or something in between. So X in between, let's say it this way, that there are measurements in between, there's monitoring in between to see whether this measure will work. And the other thing is, I think there are 2 billion in the voluntary carbon market currently, and we see nothing with our measurements, we are seeing nothing in the atmosphere. 2 billion, that should be a big decrease of CO2 in the atmosphere, or at least a smaller increase. We are not seeing this as scientists. We are measuring in the atmosphere. We are going every year to the COP and say to the politicians, you have not done your job properly. But we can also say to the market, there is nothing. So if there are 2 billion, I think there should be an inbuilt monitoring, money inbuilt in the certificate system for the monitoring. Otherwise, I think we are not getting anywhere. So if there is a certificate, there should be 1% or 5% of that going into a proper, standardized, well-developed, scientifically supported monitoring. And I think that would be, these two measures would be already a good step forward.
Thank you, Werner, for sharing the view of ICES. I have one question up here, and then I have one down here. So please.
Thank you very much. Stefan Reis from the German Aerospace Association's Project Management Agency. I would like to hear the views of the panel on the need for a systems approach, which was mentioned a couple of times in the talks, which I find particularly useful, but we were still talking about a dual crisis. We have a triple crisis with pollution. And if we are not taking into account nitrogen and the nitrogen cycle, when we are trying to manage carbon, I think we are at a risk of trading off some carbon storage versus nitrogen pollution that could make a lot more things worse, including climate change, including biodiversity loss. Really appreciate your views on that, please. Thank you.
Anyone? Claire, you want to come in? No, you are nodding.
Oops. Well, I can approve what was said. For me, it's very important, not as I was telling, not to be carbon maniac, because we are heading to big problems with biodiversity, with the quality of the water resources, with the water cycle, and the quality of our food productions. So it's very important to have this integrated view. Now it gets more complex, of course, indeed, but I think are approaches to have an integrated view that have been developed in different sectors that should be used. But of course, the monitoring, what I was proposing to have, that the monitoring for soil carbon is aligned with the monitoring that is proposed within the soil monitoring law. Of course, you can perceive that it increases, it makes it more complex, it makes it probably more costly, not fully, but I think it's really worth to try to integrate and align different policies.
And these approaches that are being developed, are they relevant in our case? Or
well, there's the soil monitoring law will monitor proposes, well, it's a proposal at this stage to monitor soil health, having indicators corresponding to soil degradation. And there is, for example, one for soil carbon loss. So here it's absolutely consistent.
Thank you, Claire. Kai, please.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely agree. And well, I can only maybe speak about, and from the perspective of the agriculture system and the food system, but indeed we need systems thinking, systems approaches, system level policies in that as well. And that's why we like to talk about regenerative agriculture as a more holistic concept and approach instead of carbon farming, which is more or less technical. And although it's not yet a fully established concept, there are different definitions. We have made our own definition, and criteria and metrics are being developed to exactly define what is regenerative agriculture. And we expect and promote that regenerative agriculture is also incorporated in the larger concepts of circular economy and supporting green energy transition and all these transformations that we need to accelerate in our societies. And referring to nitrogen, regenerative agriculture has the attribute to increase the organic nitrogen utilization efficiency in the agricultural system, thereby reducing input of synthetic mineral nitrogen and thereby supporting circular economy. So definitely a systems perspective is needed and it can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. I think we have one last question and then we move on to the closing remarks. So please.
Thank you very much. I'm Fanny Long from the European Association representing forest owners, CEPF, here in Brussels. Thank you for the very interesting discussion. I had a question regarding what we heard from Mrs. Chenu and also from Alex. The reward of the forest owners and managers and farmers. We heard that the pioneers should be rewarded, and it's very important. We also heard from Alex a contribution-based model that should be developed to reward forest owners and farmers. And I was wondering, and also for the rest of the panel, this financing question is of course key. And I was wondering whether in WWF or in the scientific community, there are also studies related to how this finance should work or could work, or some models or some experiences, because of course this is also something we are looking from a forest owner's perspective, looking at different experiences in different countries. So I would be interested to get the views of the panel on that. Thank you.
All right. Alex, I'll pass on to you, and then I suggest for the rest of the panelists, we'll do it in the lobby. Unfortunately, there's another meeting starting at 3 sharp. So to allow for closing remarks, I think, Alex, if you reply, and then we can continue in the lobby, please.
Thank you. Yeah, Fanny, just to answer your question very, very briefly, I think, yeah, I mean, we think there are examples of contribution-based financing being developed. Our office in WWF Finland is working, I think, on a sort of Finnish model that's being developed whereby companies might contribute to a fund that would reward farmers or foresters and so on for climate-friendly practices that remove carbon. Our concern, as I say, is that where we seem to be going with the Commission proposal is a market-based system where, airlines, oil and gas companies, whoever, will be able to buy land-based carbon credits, which are uncertain, despite the excellent work that's being done by the scientific community, that are potentially reversible, and therefore actually simply delay the decarbonisation efforts that we need. I wonder if I could just pick up on something Gary said about that we need to harvest our forests to maintain the carbon sink. I mean, yes, it's true that as forests age, the rate of carbon absorption slows, doesn't end completely, but it does slow. But that doesn't mean that we should, go and cut them down. I mean, that's a good thing if our forests are biodiverse and full of carbon, and that's what we need. And although, I'm just to be clear, we're not saying that we won't harvest forests. Obviously, we need to use wood for certain things, but we shouldn't be encouraging additional harvesting of forests as a climate solution. And the JRC, the Commission's own scientists, have made this very clear. If that were true, if that logic were true, we should find the most ancient forests we can, the ancient old-growth forests, and immediately cut them down and start managing them intensively. Of course, is crazy in climate terms.
Thank you, Alex, for these views. Before we close, I want to, thank you for all the questions. Apologies for not being able to answer all of them, but don't hesitate to put them in writing, and we will pass them on to the relevant speakers. Of course, also thank you to all of our panelist speakers that made yourself available for this workshop here today, to our host and co-hosts. And then I'm going to pass on the word to MEP Katainen for the closing remarks. Please.
Thank you, Lena. And I'd like to thank you, everyone, all the speakers, experts and audience for the very interesting discussion we've had today. I hope this event has raised the meaning of the specific awareness of the specific opportunities, but also the challenges behind the evaluation of carbon removals. We have a lot of cross-border research data which offers a lot of opportunities, and this potential should be fully exploited in the legislation. And I think that is very important that farms and farmers are really truly involving this in the whole legislation, of course, but also the researching works, that they are there, not just a target, but doing that researching work with you. And also, when we are creating a new reliable carbon markets, that would bring some extra incomes for the farmers and forest owners. And I also hope that the Commission have gained a lot of benefit and information today, and all the discussion we are doing all the time, which can be taken into account and utilized in the future
legislative proposals, for example, in the future soil monitoring and forest monitoring proposals that we are waiting for. So with these words, thank you everyone and have a nice day.